Hello, my name is Ethan. I'm a high schooler about to be railroaded into college, have a career, and make money. It's the natural next step. So I've been told by my parents, so I've been told by my school, so I've been told by colleges, so I've been told by the world, or at least that's what it feels like. We're all told by the man in our lives how to live, whether you listen to him or not. Who's the man? Well, that could be your parents, the media you consume, societal expectations, etc. Even though the explicit message we're often given by media and mentors in our lives is that we can do anything and the sky's the limit, there's definitely always a subliminal component. Everything from the nature of questions that are posed to you to the ads that you receive. Sometimes we give that voice a bit too much credence. We end up tossing aside our passions, partially losing ourselves, and generally conforming to what's expected of us to our own detriment. But in the end, the path we take in our pursuit to appease societal expectations often isn't our own. And at the end of that path awaits discontent. Now, what exactly got me into thinking mode? Believe it or not,
Adventure time!
let me just say for the record, rewatching this show as an adult is
You wanna go inside? Bounce around for a little?
entertaining. But also, as an adult, you pick up more of the lessons they put down. Which is why I'd like to talk about Season 2, Episode 5, Storytelling. Where basically, Jake gets sick and can only be cured by a real story. So, Finn goes out to find one for him. Through Jake's sickness, Finn's search for a story, and the people he meets along the way, Adventure Time offers us an antidote to our own contrived stories. Let's start with Jake's sickness. The story starts off when Jake comes down with a terrible illness. Finn tries some things to offer him relief, but to no avail. It's then that Jake tells Finn the only way to cure him will be to tell him a real story. Finn then goes outside, finds a snail on a leaf, and excited to have found a real story, tells Jake about it. This only makes Jake worse, because a real story must have
excitement, romance, suspense, and it has to have a happy ending.
and he even gives Finn a list. And so he goes out into the world again to find a story with fighting, romance, suspense, and a happy ending. Now, here, Jake has been set up as a sort of figure of influence. He's pressured Finn into seeking his idea of what a real story is, rejecting the story he found naturally. Jake even threatens Finn with his own death. It's much like the unhappy people we see in real life. Like Finn, seeking careers and roles simply because they've been taught by society that's what their story should be. Or perhaps they do it in fear of what may happen if they diverge. Let's move on to Finn's quest. In the next part of the episode, Finn goes out in search of a story, armed with the list Jake gave him. He starts with romance. He starts off with a direct approach, asking some ants and some squirrels to kiss in front of him. When that doesn't go his way, he blatantly declares he'll take a natural approach. First, he comes across a goof named Boobafina and a fox named Mr. Fox. He then brazenly asks that they kiss in front of him. As they should, they called him a creep and asked him to leave. He didn't let go of the matter, however, only pleading harder that they engage in the act lest his best friend, Jake, die, even eating dirt to convince them of his honesty. He does this to no avail, and eventually settling on grabbing the two animals by their necks and pushing them together until they kissed. Yikes. That doesn't go down well. Boobafina starts crying, proclaiming her love for Mr. Goose, a goose, lamenting that she can't be with him now that she's been quote-unquote soiled. On Mr. Fox's end, he confesses to Finn that he loved Boobafina, but now their first kiss was forced and not natural like he wanted it. Finn is momentarily pushed back by his reaction, doubting whether it's right, only to be mentally pressured by Jake to continue his search for a story. So he marches forth. He has similar encounters with other animals, picking a fight with a teenage bear, subsequently summoning his overbearing mama, and even considering smashing a basket of baby birds for the suspense portion of Jake's list. This metaphor here is fairly clear-cut. Much like the expectations pushed on us by society, all the animals in this episode are pushed into the story that Jake wants. Not only that, Finn even loses sight of who he is, catching himself trying to smash a basket of baby birds in pursuit of Jake's story. Much like the effects of society forcing us into these paths, this generally ruined everyone's day and prevented them from living out their own lives organically, as they are, in favor of contrived idea of what a story or life should look like. Lastly, we have the episode's climax. The animals of the forest, having had enough, capture Finn. He's subsequently knocked out by a figure known as the Forest Wizard, and when he wakes up, the tide had turned against him. The Forest Wizard proclaims that Finn will be buried alive for interfering with quote-unquote the order of the forest, and begins lowering him into the earth. Finn desperately looks for a way out and is struck by an epiphany. He realizes that the order of the forest was holding all of the animals back and explains to all of them how adhering to it made them live unhappy lives. He proceeds to give all the animals advice, telling Bubafina to confess her love to Mr. Goose, Mr. Fox to get over Bubafina, Teenage Bear to respect his mama, and Mama Bear to let Teenage Bear be his own person. After resolving all the animals' unhappy lives, the Forest Wizard still insists that Finn be buried alive for messing with the order of the forest, but quickly drops his resolve because he says it's just better this way. Now, in this final section, it was revealed that the animals were all adhering to a sort of order, meaning that the unhappy lives they led were due to an overarching order the whole time. Only when Finn encouraged them to break that mold and take charge of their lives were they finally able to move on and obtain a satisfactory conclusion to their stories. In the end, Finn went back to Jake and told him the story. Though the story cured him of his illness, Finn collapsed from exhaustion, but unlike Jake, he went into a sound and satisfying sleep. So why does this episode matter? I'm not going to claim that the writers were explicitly trying to hold a mirror up to the audience or society even, but they did offer an antidote to people who are held back from living their happy life. If we look back to the final act of the episode, all the characters had to overcome something in order to move on with their lives. Bubafina had to get over her fear of rejection. Mr. Fox had to let go of Bubafina. Teenage Bear needed to confront his ego, and Mama Bear needed to come to terms with their newly grown son. If it weren't for Finn realizing last minute that he couldn't just fit these animals into the boxes Jake had made for them, their real conclusions would have gone unfulfilled, and their unhappy lives would have continued. In the end, it was Finn's realization that they didn't have to fit those boxes that freed them to move on and live their best lives. In the same way, storytelling causes us to break free from the lives that society tells us we should live and forge our own path instead. Only then can we find ourselves in our own happy endings. Thanks for watching.